Looks like we're ready to get started. Hopefully you enjoyed your meal this evening, and we're getting ready to get started. What you notice on the wall is basically the thrust of tonight's presentation, our human responsibility. Actually, human responsibility is to take care of the poor, the sick, and the elderly. And you can tell a lot about the soul of a person by how they treat the poor, the sick, and the elderly. We're going to be talking then, in order to highlight this thing, we'll spend some time talking about Mother Teresa of Calcutta, and then we'll talk about how she dealt with and how, out of just great love that she had in her heart, how she took care of the elderly, the poor, and the sick. And so how she did it is hopefully something we already do, because we don't have to watch how Mother Teresa takes care of the poor, the sick, and the elderly. We can do it ourselves just by having the love of Christ in our heart. Then we know what we need to do. Let's take a look at this quote by Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa said, "By blood I am Albanian, by citizenship an Indian, by faith I am a Catholic nun. As to my calling, I belong to the world. As to my heart, I belong entirely to the heart of Jesus." You see, every one of us, we can look at that quote, and you can place your own name inside of that quote. So you can change the name Mother Teresa said, and you can add your own name and just change every one of those locations. By citizen, I'm an American. By faith, I'm a Catholic, period. Or in my case, Catholic priest. As to my calling, my heart belongs to the world. And as to my heart, I belong entirely to Jesus Christ. You see, every one of us, we do more than just one thing. So if someone asks you, what do you do? You might say, well, I'm an engineer. You might say I'm a school teacher. But the truth of the matter is, we have all kinds of different jobs. So you're a son or daughter. You're a wife or a husband. You are a parent. You are a friend. You are a son. You are a daughter. You're a worker. You're a Catholic. There's so many different jobs that we have all at one time. And our job is to do all those different roles well. What we're going to do is take a couple of minutes. I enjoy Father Robert Barron. He's going to give us a little explanation to Mother Teresa of Calcutta. This is just a fabulous gal. So let's watch what he has to say.
I've been all over the world the past couple years filming for the Catholicism Project. We've been to Rome and to Jerusalem, Mexico City, New York, Paris, Warsaw, lots of different places. But I must say, nothing has affected me the way the city I just visited has affected me, namely Calcutta, India. We went there to film in those places associated with Mother Teresa and the work of her sisters. So we weren't going to the relatively presentable spots in Calcutta, but to the meanest of the mean streets there, some of the darkest places in the world. And there are certain images that are burned into my mind, I'm sure, forever from Calcutta. One was of a kid, or maybe 10 years old, and he was gathering horse manure with his own hands. And our guide said he's going to gather that to sell it, later. I remember a woman just outside of the Mother Teresa headquarters, the Mother House, who was just uttering this blood-curdling scream. She was mentally ill, or she was disturbed, or I don't know what the trouble was, but she was just uttering this frightening scream. I remember being surrounded by kids begging, looking emaciated and looking very needy and gesturing to their mouths with a kind of desperate gesture. Just the sheer filth of Calcutta. It's a bit like living in a garbage dump. Imagine the worst garbage dump you've seen, and now think of the whole city that way. Things just thrown everywhere, a stench that just gets into your nostrils from the time you leave the hotel. So some of the worst and most overwhelmingly negative images I've ever seen. I said to somebody, it's a bit like moving through a nightmare. You come out of a nightmare, you describe what happened to you. It was a bit like that, moving through the streets of Calcutta. And I think of this. I think of Mother Teresa, who began, her work as a Loreto sister in Calcutta. But then on her way to Darjeeling, which is far north of Calcutta, on the way to a retreat. She heard a voice. She identified it as the voice of Jesus calling her to this radical commitment to found an order that would serve the poorest of the poor. And she knew all about the poorest of the poor because they lived right there in Calcutta. You think of, the poverty in our cities, it's nothing compared to Calcutta. She knew that. She knew what it was like and heard that call to bring the gospel precisely there. And we went to film her mother house and went to film her sisters. The first day we visited her grave, which to me was very moving. I said Mass right there in the room next to her grave. And to see the people coming in, the pilgrims coming in with obvious devotion, a deep sense of prayer, lighting a candle and praying. I was thinking, probably in 500 years or 1,000 years, they'll still be coming to that spot to pray. And we were there just, now 13 years after Mother Teresa died. We also visited her very tiny cell in the mother house. Maybe it's 12 feet by 12 feet if it was that big. A bed with an impossibly thin mattress, and a little, more or less a picnic table. That's what she had, like a table with 2 little benches attached to it. The only decoration, I think she had a photograph of herself with the Pope, and then a picture of the little flower, which I found very moving too. She took her name from Thérèse of Lisieux. But this utterly simple place within the context of this squalid city. The next day, though, we filmed at a couple of her the places where her sisters ministered. The first one was a home for kids, and it was very hot when we arrived. It was like 115 degrees in Calcutta, and the electricity had gone out that morning, so even the little fans they had failed. So we're in this stiflingly hot room. Kids were in various cribs and places, and the nuns were caring for them. And the one that stayed in my mind is this young nun. Her name, I don't remember, but her smile, I think I'll never forget, because she was there with this young kid, 1.5 or 2 years old, who was blind. Her eyes were kind of sunken in her head. And the child was obviously very connected to this sister. She was like her mother. And the sister said, "She's my special baby." And she was, holding her. And as she held her, this absolutely radiant smile comes over her face, And it just struck me, in the midst of all of this squalor and all of this darkness and negativity, and here's this joy, this radiant joy on the face of this nun. And of course, that was the Mother Teresa gift. That's what she was. Anyone that saw her there in Calcutta testified to it. It was the joyfulness that came out of Mother Teresa. And see, that is what's really struck me. It's a lesson of Calcutta. We spend all of our time trying to find joy. That's what all human beings want. Religious, non-religious, rich, poor, men, women. Everybody wants joy. Here's the mistake, though, that 98% of us make. I'll get joy by filling up something in me that's lacking. That's the game we play. We say, I'm missing something. I don't have enough. And then we fill in the blank. It's money, or power, or pleasure, or esteem. There's something I'm missing, and I won't be happy until I get it. And so then we strive and strive and strive. And so read most of our lives under that rubric. Most of us spend most of our days doing just that, seeking to fill up the emptiness with something, from the outside. But see, it just doesn't work that way. There's what the Bible's telling us from the first page, what the whole Catholic tradition tells us, what Mother Teresa and all the saints tell us. It doesn't work that way. And see, deep down we all know it too, don't we? We strive and strive and strive, and we fill up and fill up, but we're not made happy. You're made happy precisely by turning your own life into a gift, by emptying out your life, by giving away what you have in love. That's what fills you up. And see, Calcutta and the Mother Teresa sisters in the midst of it signal this with enormous power, because there's nothing there. Wealth is none of it. Pleasure, it's the opposite of pleasure. Power, everyone's is destitute. Honor, no one's honored. It's a place where there's nothing of the good of the world. And yet in the midst of it comes this radiantly joyful smile of the sister, because she gets it, she understands it. Joy comes from the emptying out of the self in love. And so we know it from the Bible, we know it from the great tradition. But what happened to me in Calcutta was I saw it, and sensed it as viscerally as possible. And that to me was the great lesson of Calcutta.
On the sheets that you received, if you would turn to the part that says biography, Mother Teresa, it's actually going to be the second page of what you received when you came in tonight. Mother Teresa, a very beautiful saint. Now, we're not going to go over the whole thing because I just wanted you to have that so you could go through it tonight or tomorrow whenever you have time to read this and just get a greater feel for this incredible saint, Mother Teresa. What I enjoy about Mother Teresa, especially if you are close to my age, since she lived from 1910 and died in 1997, many times as a young man I'd be watching the news, as a young priest, I'd be watching the news and there would be Mother Teresa. So she was a living saint among us. Many times when we read lives about the saints lived back in the 12th, 13th, 14th century, and it's difficult to identify with a saint because they lived so many years ago. But Mother Teresa was a saint among us. And if, again, you were my age, you would see her on television and you say to yourself, I could identify with her because she was a contemporary of all of us. So if you have that page open, if you'd be good enough to go down to the quote just below the first paragraph. The quote says this, and this is Mother Teresa. It's not how much we do, but how much love we put into the doing. It is not how much we give, but how much love we put into the giving. You know, that quote right there, I have had elderly people, those who are sick and the infirmed, when I visit them sometimes in their homes or in nursing homes, I've had many moms and dads, the elderly, talk to me about not necessarily this quote by Mother Teresa, but they'll say something very interesting to me, especially if they're living in the home of a son or daughter. And many times this is before they're put into a nursing home. But when you're taking care of someone who's elderly or someone who is sick, the way you feel in your heart is conveyed in your hands and your arms. And so if you're in a bad mood and you're agitated and mom's taking a whole lot of work and a whole lot of effort, mom is elderly and she doesn't seem to be listening to what you're saying, as you're trying to change mom or wash mom or feed mom, mom can feel what in your arms? She can feel your anger. As you try to touch her and lift her up, she can just feel there's not a loving embrace there. She can just feel that, not that you want to hurt her, but you're not conveying the love that you should be conveying as you're trying to take care of mom or dad who is elderly. You know, they say, and I've heard this many times, we are once a man and twice a baby. We are once a woman and twice a baby. So when we start off in this world, obviously we start off as little babies. And you think about, the hassle you put your mom and dad through. When you're a little baby, 2, 3, 4, 5 months old, this is before you do anything wrong verbally, or do anything wrong with your hands or your arms, or before you punch anyone, or you strike out at your brother. But all the work mom and dad put into us when we were little babies. They fed us, they loved us, and then they changed us. And it was time and time and time again, they changed us. I've talked to many moms over the years and many dads, and it's something I hear all the time, that they would be changing their little one's diaper. Nowadays, they're throwaway diapers. When I was young, they were cloth, and so your mom had to wash them. But you change your baby's diaper, and just as you were putting on the new diaper, they soiled it. So you have two choices. Well, it's not that bad, I'll just go with it. Or you take it off, you clean the person up, and you put on another one. And then we grow up to become men and women. And then if we live long enough, a long time, sometimes we revert back to being a baby. Where maybe our son or daughter that we once took care of, we fed them, we bathed them, and 1,000 times over that, we changed their diaper. And mom and dads do this with love. So can you do it with an elderly parent, someone who has maybe soiled themselves, or food is running out and running on their shirt, running on their blouse? It is not how much we do, but how much love we put into the doing. And when you're taking care of the elderly, they can feel your love or they can feel your lack of love. It is not how much we give, it's how much we put into the giving. The Saint and Mother Teresa of Calcutta, she kind of took her name and she took her direction from Saint Teresa de Lisieux. If you go to this next page and go over to the bottom paragraph, I just want to show something to you that caught my eye. In the last paragraph, and I'll start off the first line, and hopefully you are where I'm located. If you're not, you can find it. It says in 1952, she, Mother Teresa, opened her first home for the dying, which allowed people to die with dignity. Mother Teresa often spent time with those who were dying. Some have criticized the lack of proper medical attention and refusal to give painkillers, which Mother Teresa wasn't in favor of. But others say that it afforded many neglected people the opportunity to die knowing someone cared. Now, what I want to do is just back up to about the middle of that sentence. You know what's amazing is whenever we see someone do something good, it's easy to criticize them. But what solution are you offering that is better than what they're doing? So when I read that paragraph, I thought to myself, isn't that how it works? Look at it. Just that center line. Now, she opens up her first home for the dying back in 1952. And Mother Teresa often spent time with those who were dying. She was there. So she just doesn't open up this home for dying, slap her name on the front of the home of Mother Teresa for the dying, and then she never shows up again. She was actually there. Corporal works of mercy. She was there with her feet. She was there with her hands. She was taking care of the elderly and the infirm and the dying. But take a look at this part right here. Some have criticized the lack of proper medical attention because what she was doing, she was running on a shoestring. Everything she did with donated funds. So she did the best that she could. And she didn't have unlimited resources to have incredible amount of medical materials that she needed to take care of those she was taking care of. And many criticized her refusal to give painkillers. But what were those same people doing in place of that? The folks who criticized her style of taking care of the dying, did they say, look, I don't like the way you're taking care of the dying, so I'm going to open up a home for the dying, and I'm going to do much better than you, Mother Teresa? Now, that's usually not the case. Typically, what you find in this world, those who criticize, typically, that's all they do. They have one gift, the gift to criticize, and sometimes, not to say it's true for all, but sometimes they don't offer a greater solution than one you're working with on your own, the one they've decided to criticize. She herself did not favor painkillers. Now, if you go to the next page, about 2 paragraphs down, and I'll start, so hopefully you'll find out where you could pick up where I left off. I just think this part here is absolutely beautiful. Mother Teresa never sought to convert those of another faith. Those in her dying homes were given the religious rites appropriate to their faith. Isn't that beautiful? So when she brought people in, she brought all kinds of people into her dying homes. And it wasn't her objective to convert all those people to Catholicism. Whatever they were in life, Catholics, Protestants, whatever religion they followed, even if they didn't follow religion, she made sure they were comfortable receiving religious rites of the religion that they practiced. She didn't try to convert anyone. So that means she did what? A very important attribute in the life of everyone here. She accepted people for who they were and how they were. She never tried to change anyone. Isn't that a gift? When you run across any person for the first time and you get to know someone, you try to change that person? Or you just say, well, that's the way he is. That's the way she is. And just accept them for who they are, as they are. And that's what she did. Then if you go to the very last page, I think it's the last page. Yes, it is. I think this is something that when you go home and you're reading this nice little biography of Mother Teresa, I just want you to dwell on this for a while. And about the center of that page. When she was asked how to promote world peace, she replied, and this is a great quote, think about it. When she was asked how to promote world peace, she replied, go home and love your family. Isn't that amazing? You know what that really means? That means focus on doing what is right in your life and the life of your family. Don't focus on what this guy is doing that is wrong. Clean up your own house first. So you can watch television tonight, and maybe you've had a huge fight with your wife, and maybe you might have slapped your kids around a little bit. Now you're watching television, and you don't want to be a Pharisee, and you don't want to say, oh, look how those people act in those other countries. What Mother Teresa is saying is, make sure what you do in your own life and your own home is proper. You know, we have to make sure we're doing things right. So when she was asked how to promote world peace, I think that's beautiful. She said, go home and love your family. If you love your son, your daughter, your wife, your husband, and you love your family, that's just going to protract, right? And when your family is loved, those that they connect with, they'll also then share that same style of love. But if your house is distorted and you're not sharing any love in your own home, well, you can't expect your neighbor to do much better. So if you take this home, and I want you to read, if you'd be good enough to read the whole thing, I just think it's beautiful. Again, Mother Teresa is such a great saint. We're going to look at a quote. We're going to talk a little bit about the elderly and how to take care of the elderly. There's a beautiful quote. It goes like this. Aging. We might not survive the day, but if we do, and we continue to live, we will be there tomorrow. That's how you get to be 80, 90 years old. You might not survive the day, and we have no idea what the day is going to hold. We just presuppose for all of us, we'll finish up the session tonight, we'll drive home, watch a little bit of TV, crawl in bed and go to sleep and wake up tomorrow morning. Hopefully that's the future for all of us. But for one of us, that might not be the case. One of us might not make it home tonight, and one of us might not wake up tomorrow morning. But if we make it home tonight, and we wake up tomorrow morning, and we keep doing that day after day after day, and year after year after year, we will eventually be here tomorrow. And in doing that, we're going to age. You know, I remember some years ago. And part of being a priest, and just about every parish you're assigned to, there are always nursing homes, and they're growing. We take care of the elderly in many different ways in today's society. There was a time in the world that when your parents got old, you made sure they stayed home with you. But there's a tendency, maybe because you can't give the care that they need, and it's a wise decision sometime to move them on to a care facility. But if you do that, it doesn't mean that they then should be abandoned. I remember at this one assignment I said Mass at this nursing home, a pretty nice-sized nursing home. I had Mass there every Friday at 1:30. So every Friday at 1 o'clock, I would make it to the nursing home so I could enter the nursing home, go to the place where I had the Mass, and set my little altar up and celebrate Mass. And this one day, my very first trip there to say Mass at 1:30, I walk in the door, and there's this elderly lady at the door. And I said to her, "Hi, how are you?" She said, "Good." I said to her, "What are you up to?" She said, "I'm waiting for my son. He's going to take me shopping." I thought that was really nice. What a nice son she has. The following Friday, well, when I had Mass, she wasn't at Mass, so I thought, well, either she is Catholic and her son took her shopping, is what I figured, or she isn't Catholic and her son still took her shopping. But that's why she wasn't at Mass, no big deal. The next Friday, my second time at this nursing home, I get there she is, standing at the front entrance door. I said, "Hey, how you doing?" She said, "Good." I said, "What are you up to?" She said, "My son is taking me shopping." I thought to myself, "He's a very nice guy. What a nice son she has." So this went on literally for 6 or 7 months worth of Fridays. Friday after Friday after Friday, I get to this nursing home. There's the elderly lady. "Hey, how you doing?" "Great." "What are you up to?" "My son's taking me shopping." Oh, that was fabulous. And deep down inside, I always thought to myself, I can't wait to meet this son. I got to tell this guy, "Hey, buddy, you're doing a really nice job. You're a good son." I thought I was a good son. You got me beat. So this one day I get there, it's about month 8 or 9, and I'm just talking to one of the nurses. And I said to this nurse, I said, "You know, there's a lady out there, she's got one really great son." I said, "She stands at the door every Friday when I get here. She's standing at the door, waiting for her son to take her shopping." And she said to me, "Oh, no, she's there every day." Wow, wait, you mean this son takes her shopping every day? This guy's even better than I thought. I thought he was great. This guy's like a saint. Every day he's taking her shopping? She said, No, he's never taken her shopping." And I thought to myself, well, maybe I'm trying to think all this stuff really fast. I thought, well, maybe the son died. And what the mom is doing is she stands there with the prayer that he's going to come through the door and take her shopping. So maybe that's how she's dealing with his loss. That's what I'm quickly thinking. So I said to the nurse, I said, "Well, what do you mean he's never been here to take her shopping? Did he die?" "No, he didn't die." "Well, maybe he lives really far away. Where does he live?" And she said something that shocked me. She said, "He lives right up the road, about a half mile from this nursing home." Lives right up the road. But she stands every day waiting to take her shopping. She stands there. How can this be?" She said, "Father Kenny, he's never been here." He said many years ago, he drove in front of the nursing home. He dropped her mother off at the door, and he's never been back since. Never been back since. She stands there every day in a dream, hoping that he'll swing by and take her shopping. Every day. She was there every Friday. But she was there every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday, waiting for this guy to take her shopping. And he lived right up the road. Well, I did some inquiry trying to figure out what was going on. You know, why wouldn't he stop over to visit his mom? And then I discovered some sad things on his part. But what I found amazing is, in order for him to go to work and in order for him to go about his daily activity, he had to drive by the very nursing home that his mom was in. Isn't that sad? That's what it means by aging. We might not be here tomorrow. So if that be the case for you or I, and we're still in our 50s, or you might be younger than that, we'll never get the chance to be old. But if we are here tomorrow and the next day and the day after that, eventually we'll wake up one day and we will be elderly. You know, Pope Benedict said something very beautiful about the elderly. Let's take a look at it. Pope Benedict XVI, in the year 2012, said this: "The quality of a society, of a civilization, will be judged by how it treats the elderly and by the place reserved for them in the communal life. To give space to the elderly is to give space to life." Now, it turns out to be a society is judged not only by how we treat the elderly, A society is always judged by how we treat the vulnerable. So how do we treat the unborn? Well, we already know that. We know that since Roe versus Wade has been part of our life, that literally millions and millions of little ones have been aborted. And that is really a black mark on the history of the United States. We have a great history, incredible history of the United States. But when it comes to legalized abortion, that is a black mark on our history, which is really unfortunate. We should never allow that to occur, especially in a country in which we vote for our elected officials. I've always believed that through one voting cycle, that everyone who voted and passed for legalized abortion, they should all have been out of office. But how we treat our elderly and how we treat the unborn, how we treat the vulnerable, speaks a lot about all of us. When you go to a nursing home, and it's a very humbling experience. Every time I go to a nursing home, and it's often, it's been most of my priesthood, I always get a great feeling when I leave. Because I say to myself, one of these days, I will not be leaving. Because one of these days, I'll probably be a resident. You know, there was this fella at a nursing home in Penn Township, William Penn Care Center. And William Penn Care Center is a fairly decent-sized nursing home. There was this fella, he went to visit his wife absolutely every day. Every day. He'd get there early in the morning, and he would stay there until it was time for him to go home. Literally, it would kick him out. It's time to go home. And he would sit right next to his wife, and his wife in a wheelchair, and he would take her to eat, and he would feed her. She was dealing with dementia and Alzheimer's. When he first put her in a nursing home, she was cognizant. But as the days turned into months and then years, she actually had no idea who he was. So this William Penn Care Center, they had a little complimentary coffee shop there. They would have coffee and cookies and things like that for caregivers and for visitors. And many times when I would go there to give communion out to people, usually on my way out the door, deep down inside glad that I'm able to leave because I realize that one day I'll have to stay because I'll be a resident. I would usually stop over if I had the time to the little coffee snack bar, get myself a cup of coffee, and just chit-chat with whoever was there about anything. So this one day I get there and I make myself a cup of coffee, and this man who visited his wife every day, because I would see him with his wife when I would go to give her communion and then give him communion as well. So he's there in this little snack area, this little coffee shop area, and he's there talking to another guy. And they're having this conversation, and the most beautiful thing unfolded. It was absolutely beautiful. He tells this other guy, he said that he's been there every day, literally for years, from morning to night, to be with his wife. He said to this other fellow, he said that his wife has dementia and Alzheimer's. For many years, she hasn't known who he is. Despite that fact, he goes there in the morning, stays the night. And the fellow he was talking to, he said, you know, your wife doesn't know who you are. No, she doesn't know who I am. She hasn't known me literally for years. I sit right next to her. I try to feed her, and she'll eat a little bit. She doesn't chase me away, but does she know I'm even a human being? I don't know. But she doesn't know who I am. And he said to this husband, this incredible, faithful husband, he said, well, you know, I'm confused. If your wife doesn't know who you are, and she has Alzheimer's, dementia, and you come in here every day, why do that? Why not show up every so often? Why not go home? Why not go late and leave early? She doesn't even know you're there. Why do you do this every day for all these years? He gave a beautiful answer. You know what he said? He said, you're right. My wife doesn't know who I am. But I come here every day because I know who she is. I said to myself, wow, that's a great answer. That should be on a Valentine's card. Because I love my wife, I love my husband, because I know who she is. I know who he is. That's why I take care of her. That's why I take care of him. That's why I put my whole focus on my spouse, despite the fact they don't know me, but I know them. Isn't that beautiful? When you see someone who's elderly, what are your thoughts? Let's watch this beautiful little story. It's called Cranky Old Men Poem. Let's watch. I'll talk about it later. Naturally, who are the elderly? Well, the definition is, as we age, and if we continue to live, and we wake up tomorrow and the next day and the day after that, the elderly will one day be me and one day will be you. So we're going to want someone to treat us good because we're going to get there eventually. The good Lord blesses us with life. How do we treat them now? On the very front of your sheet that you received when you walked in, the very front says the Catholic Church's stand on elderly rights. You can read this whole thing to yourself later, but I just want to go over the first part. One of the Ten Commandments found in the book of Genesis instructs Christians to honor their father and mother. This biblical commandment takes on a new meaning when father and mother become elderly and need extra care. The Catholic Church firmly believes that every person has the right to live. Protecting the dignity of life in all forms is a responsibility of the church family. If you're taking care of someone who's elderly, how do you do it? Do you convey love and compassion in how you touch them, how you feed them? When you're feeding someone who's elderly, an elderly parent, and you put the food to their mouth and it drips out onto their chin, do you use the spoon to wipe it off gently or to push in tight because you're aggravated and mad? You know, going back to a little experience I had in a nursing home. I was just a young priest at the time when I was going to this nursing home, and when I got to this one room to give communion to this lady was always in a fetal position. She was always curled up. Most of us sleep in a fetal position because it offers us, they say, psychologists, the security of being in the womb of our mother. And when I first went into this lady's room to give her communion, right across from her bed, on the wall opposite her bed, was this gal, a young woman, wearing a one-piece bathing suit, sitting on a rock right next to the beach, flowing long black hair. And when I looked at that picture, I thought to myself, when God made that gal, he did a masterful job. Everything was just proportioned correctly. So I remember giving this gal communion, and she could barely talk. She didn't seem very excited about life. She didn't seem to be happy about life. I didn't know her because I wanted to ask her about her granddaughter. But I thought, well, my first time seeing this lady. So the next time I went back to that particular nursing home, it was a month later to give communion, and she was there again, curled up in a fetal position. And month after month after month, we would have little conversations. And I would ask her questions to try to draw some things out from her, just to learn a little bit about her. And finally, after about a year, I think we became friends. I knew her, and I knew a little bit about her. And so now I thought I knew her good enough that I could ask her about her granddaughter. So I got there one day, and I'm all revved up, and I said to her, as we're having a conversation, she stayed kind of nestled in bed. And I said to her, hey, your granddaughter, she's absolutely beautiful. And she said to me, that's not my granddaughter. Okay. So I made a slight adjustment, and I said to her, well, hey, your daughter, she is absolutely beautiful. And she said, that's not my daughter. Oh, okay. Did the picture come with the room? And she said to me, Father Ken, take a look at that picture. And I looked at it again. She said, Father Ken, that's me. I said, that's you? So I looked at her and looked at the picture and looked at her and looked at the picture. I said, that's you? Oh, Father Ken. She said, come on. She said, I wasn't always old. You only know me as old. She said, Father Ken, I've had 5 kids. I've had 4 husbands. I've had 3 jobs. I had 2 lovers and 1 incredible life. And I said to her, hey, let me ask you a question. When you say you had 4 husbands And then you said, you tried to slip it in on me, and you said you had 2 lovers. Now, would that be in addition to those 4 husbands? And she looked at me, and for the first time in all that time, she gets a smile on her face. She said, Father Ken, she said, I had 2 affairs when I was married. I say, don't say another word. Don't say another word. Don't say anything else. So I run out of her room. I ran out of the room. I started screaming for the nurse. I said, nurse, 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 I need some coffee. I need some coffee. And the nurse at this nursing home that I happen to know, she got me a cup of coffee, and I told her I wanted some cream in it, some sugar. She gave me the coffee. Then I went back into this lady's room, and I got a chair, and I put the chair right alongside the bed. The coffee wasn't for her. But I had the coffee in my hand, and I sat down in a chair, and I said to her, hey, look, I want detail. I want your story, and I want detail. Don't leave anything out. I think you got a story here. Now, the most amazing thing happened. As she was telling me about her life, and over a year when I would give her communion, she was always curled up in a fetal position. And as she shared this with me, when I got this cup of coffee, I'm sitting in a chair, I'm content to spend the rest of the day there. I want to find out what's going on. I want to find out about, not the 4 husbands, but the 2 lovers. I just got to figure out what's going on here. And I'll tell you what happened. For the first time in over a year, do you know what she did? She sat up straight. She sat up in bed. And she's telling me her story about the husbands and the kids and the jobs and the love. She's just telling me everything. And she sits up in bed. And then she gets out of bed. I've never seen her out of bed. Never seen her out of bed. They told me she never got out of bed. And she gets out of bed and she starts walking around the room. But guess what happened? She became alive. She had this story to tell, and no one to listen, and myself included. How do we treat the elderly? Because when I first got to her room a year prior, and I gave her communion, I just thought to myself, just an elderly lady, I've seen many of them. I'll give her communion and see how far a little bit of chit-chat will go, and then I'll leave, come back next month. But I never thought that she had a life. She lived a full life. That means every elderly person from that point forward, good thing I've always was appreciative to the good Lord that this happened when I was a young priest, because it taught me a valuable lesson that I wasn't aware of. That every elderly person in the nursing home curled up in a fetal position, not talking, just worn on their face with wrinkles, and you assess that they have nothing to contribute to society. Well, guess what? They already did. They made all their contributions. She raised 5 kids. She told me what those kids were doing. She raised 5 successful children. 5 successful children. Not 3 that turned out great and 2 are in prison. But she raised 5 successful kids. And those 5 kids, from what she was telling me, they're raising successful kids. They're adding to society. And I listened to her and I thought to myself, wow, you contributed so much. And she was walking around the room. And she had this smile on her face. She came alive. She came alive. It wasn't me. I only wanted to hear her story because I wanted to get the scoop on the naughty stuff. And I'll tell you what, I can't tell you that story here. Yikes. Well, I remember when I left her room, I said to myself, compared to that lady, I think at that time I might have been 28. Compared to that lady, I had up to that point I had lived a very boring life. She lived life. I still can't match her. That she had a full, incredible life. And I was thinking to myself, wow, honey, man, that's really something. Very few people can match the story that she shared with me. Very few people have had the full life that she had. You know, when you watch that movie, Cranky Old Man, when you see someone in a nursing home, it might be your mom and dad that you go to visit. It might be the person in the next room or the next bed as you're visiting an elderly relative. And you just look at them in a fetal position, all curled up. Or when you go to a nursing home or you go to some care facility, what do you always say? You see someone sitting in a wheelchair in the middle of the room all by themselves. Pushed off into the corner. They have nothing, as if they have nothing to share. And if you sat in front of that person and said, look, I want to hear your story. Every elderly person has a great story to tell. You know why I know that? Because you, whatever your age is here, and we have young folks, young mom and dads, beautiful. But if you're only 30 or 40 or 50, already up to this point in your young life, you have a great story to tell already, right? You have a great story to tell, which means if the good Lord gives you another 30, 40 years, you're only going to add to the story that you already have to tell. But if we sat down and said, look, give me your entire story, don't hold back, I want to hear the whole thing, the good, the bad, and the ugly, you would have one incredible story. And you're only 30 or 40. That would mean by the time you get to be 80 and perhaps in a nursing home, sitting in a wheelchair where everyone else seems to walk by you and no one pays attention to you, that would mean what? That would mean you'd have even more of a story to tell. The elderly. How do we treat them? Pope Benedict XVI said this: the quality of a society, of a civilization, will be judged by how it treats its elderly and by the place reserved for them in a communal life. To give space to the elderly is to give space to life. So the challenge for all of us tonight and tomorrow is if you have an elderly parent or a grandma or grandpa that's elderly, maybe they're still living at their home. And if they are, drive over and say, Grandma, Grandpa, you know what I'm going to do? Instead of running in here 90 miles an hour, trying to convince you I'm in a big hurry to go nowhere, and then bailing out of here really fast because I think you have nothing to add to my life, when in fact you do. Maybe drive over to Grandma and Grandpa's, especially if the elderly, and pull up a chair and say, Grandma, tell me your story. I want to hear it, Grandma. I want to hear it, Grandpa. Tell me. Tell me what's been going on in your life. What was your life like when you were 40 as I am now? What was your life like when you were raising kids, my mom, as I am now? Tell me. Boy, just listen to Grandma and Grandpa. You're going to hear about their life. You're going to learn about your life because you came from them. And I guarantee you, if you just take the time to visit Grandma and Grandpa in their home, or your mom and dad in their home, or out at the nursing home, and just say, look, you know, I know when I come here always in a hurry and I really don't give you the time I should. That must hurt. When I make it sound like I'm so busy and you're not, how lucky you are just to be sitting here without nothing going on in your life. But just maybe give them a little bit of your time. Get a cup of coffee, get a chair, and say to mom or dad or grandma or grandpa if they're elderly, Grandma, Grandpa, tell me your story. Give me the details. Don't hold anything back. And I guarantee you, you're going to see a big smile on their face, and you'll be there 3-4 hours, and they'll have even more to tell. How do we treat the elderly? Do we sell them short, or do we give them our time? Well, thank you, folks. Looks like our little ones are coming back in, so thank you for being here, guys.